Hello, everybody. This is David with David Streams. Oh, I'm loud. Okay, let me adjust that back a little bit. So, I hope everybody's doing well today, and I hope we're having a good time. Today, we have a pre recorded interview from a friend of mine. Now, while we do this, I want to make certain that we have some things clear. Now, bear with me a moment while I move some things over. This is live, so I'm working on things, so hold on. There we go. Alright. Now, I'm going to go quiet, but to explain what happened, I have an older gentleman friend whose name's Andy Greenleaf, and we did a pre-recorded interview. Now, it's going to be about 45 minutes long. I hope everybody enjoys. If there's something I need to comment on or make commentary on during the interview, I'll cut in. Please enjoy, and I'll catch you on the flip side. Bye now. Hey there, everybody. This is David with David Streams. I'm doing something a little bit different today. You know how I am with the audio vlogs. I normally have a screen up with everything else. This is going to be a little bit different. This is actually going to be recorded previously, and then I'm going to narrate over it just to explain what's going on in shorter details. Basically, we have here is Andy Greenleaf. He's a friend of mine. He's been a friend of mine for quite some time. Anyways, Andy, please introduce yourself.
Well, I appreciate it, Dave, because I think folks need to understand that communication needs to be out there. And one of the oldest communications people used to have back in the day was poetry.
Mm-hmm.
We've lost a little bit of that content which inspires people to come back. You know, whether it's they like to rap, they like to sing, and I need to shorten what I have to offer. But I think, as my ancestor John Greenleaf Whittier taught me, was the poetry word or a prayer can bring people back together, and that's part of my intent.
Definitely understandable on that. Now, for those who are watching this post, what I'm going to do is actually post up a video and also show exactly what we're talking about. Now, for the audio recording, things are going to be a little bit different for Andy, so I do apologize if there's any confusion or anything like that, but we'll go and get started and showcase the first couple of poems. Now, the first poem he would want us to review and to look over was going to be the one called Summer Bulb. Now, please tell me about Summer Bulb and how you came to create that.
Well, summer bulb is for the season. We all plant here in Florida. We put our bulbs in the ground, and depending on the weather, they succeed or not. So I'll read Summer Bulb to get us focused on poetry.
Mm-hmm.
I planting early February with much hope that patience and a spring thaw I would see. Those flowers red with green sprouts. Waiting seems so daunting long, yet the hail of rain and soaking sun slow gave forth leaves with pollen on thy tree. Yes, a tint of yellow sprang with no doubt. My summer bulbs would please the strong, whom waited to snip a bouquet for home. Lighten my heart to colors bright. Lord, a simple pleasure you presented. False splendor, for what few eyes knew would come, the winds of change and harvest light. Evenings of fresh thoughts leave us contented.
Okay, very beautiful. Um, so, what? Okay, the message I got from this was, let's see, regarding summer, so the strength, the well being, yet the rain. What's your message in this? What are you trying to convey?
It, it's it's an opening to poetry and the what comes from your heart. You'll notice in some of it there'll be a religious tone at the end. What I feel that all of us have lost in not uniting our causes is we forget that simplicity of beauty and God's touch. So poetry is important in that. I had an inspiration when I met the college. So the next poem is an inspiration to everybody to get involved with their own feelings in poetry. As you read someone else's, it should inspire you to bring out from your heart. I think journalists and writers, that's where they draw their greatest strength, and poetry will trigger it.
Definitely. Now, like you said, the ending last segment. Now, pardon me, my don't. Those of you who know the segments of poetry, please don't crucify me. But the last segment of your poem, the winds of change in harvest light, evenings of fresh thought, leave us contented. Change in harvest light, fresh thought, leave us contented. So, a very interesting thought to leave on a person who actually reads this at, because it's like winds of change and harvest. Okay, interesting.
You know, taking feedback and criticism from other poets is what a poetry slam is about. It's almost a challenge for someone else to send in or to text or communicate with your podcast and send in some of their poetry.
This is not
David, you often are a critic. Would you put up my next poem?
Of course. That would be Why Do You Not Read? And it is up currently.
Why do you not read? Have you been distracted? Hear my call. Plugged into what chord and channel you all? Forgotten before your eyes the lessons herein. Whether a book of faith, screen for our sin. Plug in Wi-Fi, abbreviate each syllable. I've lost your interest, you've called my bull. Yet as you scrolled the page and tapped me true, I loved and prayed to consult and know you too. For we amongst all humanity teach and console to bring us back to read it all, page versus page. Electronic buzz, no fake news, release your cage and sit among pier or tree and look to sky. Ask yourself, why do I not read what's before me? Within your heart, a smile will form and tell you why.
Okay, that rang very powerful to me, because the message I got from this, and tell me if this is the message that you were intending to come out with. Basically, this is about the distractions of technology versus sitting down with a book or a friend and just taking the time to get away from technology and stop focusing on the minutia in our daily lives. Like, I'm picking up my cell phone, folks, like this.
Yeah. And in the small screen devices, I worry that the apps and the sales, they sell you something and you're going to watch a football game or you get an advertisement. You never finish watching the football game. You're hiding in the bushes like the advertisement. You never read through a whole book. Even in college, you're not reading through it to get the message. Or you get distracted. Your other phone rings, or somebody taps you on the shoulder and says, well, let's do something else. There's a disconnection in the small devices where the disconnection, um, you, I feel I need to bring myself back. That's why I did my next poem called Lesson Lost.
All right, before we go and get started with Lessons Lost, though, I do want to continue with this because something you said about reading a book all the way through harkens back to the fact of when I was in school. Because when I was taught through textbooks and everything, we never actually explored the entirety of the textbook. We explored certain details of certain factors. And it's one of those things where I understand that through lesson curriculum and other things like that, some things just aren't taught to us anymore. Now, I don't know if that's still happening in modern days, but it's one of those things where attention to detail and getting as much of the story as possible is kind of necessary, at least in my mind. I don't know about you, I don't know about the people who are going to be watching this, but I wanted to at least share that insight into my past.
Well, in the world of filmmakers and the current discussion in the Writers Guild and Actors Guilds, what's very important when movers and shakers, they ask for 10 pages or 15 pages abbreviated in a interview for the character part. So a writer and or actors and actresses understand that they have to feel the character or read the book. I often would get a feedback from movie producers, did you read the book? Did you read the novel? And that's a good point, David. To read the novel, and to know who the writer was in the book, you'll understand important programs like Outlander or TV productions. They have to abbreviate through their technical work what they produce and promote to the public. But if the background people haven't read the book, they don't get into the feeling of what's trying to be shared by the writer.
I think some of those lessons that you were just talking about regarding why did you not read harkens back to certain series like The Witcher or the certain series that was that Netflix had released regarding Lady Galadriel. And it's some of those things...
Lady who?
Galadriel in the Tolkien series, the One Ring. Now, as a part of criticism, I looked at that series. There's been criticism in that series for a long time. Also, another series, The Wheel of Time.
The Wheel of Time?
Yes. It regards a book series by Robert Jordan, and they turned the series on its head. They didn't actually follow through with the proper tiers of books and everything in regards to it. They kind of, pardon the language, but they kind of bastardized the versions. They adapted it and made it their own. Now, I understand that happens with movies. You can't always be 100% accurate to the books. But when you adapt the story and you change it so that it's no longer the heart of what the author intended it to be, you're bastardizing the meaning and the message behind the book.
That's a good observation, but that's basically what the guilds are experiencing in their negotiations. When everyone has to find their value, their monetary value to what they write, in my experience, it's not a criticism. They change an idea that, for instance, in the movie Finding Forrester with Sean Connery, the professor's so much in control of the student's writing, and his ego is so high, the professor, that he's not formulating what you just expressed, a feeling coming from the writers, the novelists, the originator of the book or the thought. In the real world, they're going to snip and clip something, and you use the term bastardize. They simply clean it up. For instance, you have that right even in a podcast. If I start using swear words, or I get off content and I make an offhand comment about something else or something current, and it has a negative thinking process, we're not keeping up that college lessons that we learned in school. There's a proper time and place to say things.
I would agree, and the reason why, and I'll be honest, the reason why we're actually not doing this live, and I've had other live things, is because of the fact that I know that this is sensitive matters, and I know that my channel and certain people in my community have been attacked before, and I have been canceled. So it's one reason why I do this way, to protect my channel and community.
That's another conversation in the cancel culture. Let me shorten this so that you can work back toward lesson loss.
Of course.
Lesson loss was written because of safety. What's very important in unions and any job that you do, there's the old saying in the artistic world, don't lose your day job. And one reason is you're taught safety procedure. And safety procedures are SOPs, standard operating procedures, and it's there for your safety, the public safety, and anybody who wanders into your filming, an example. So lesson loss was written with that in mind, so I'll read it. I hope you read along. What I forgot to check, the safety list. My boat, you ask, looks leaky at its best. Well, hurry now, the schedule calls, rings about. We must hurry, the storm will come for thy test. Our minds clear or fogged, we forgot to check. What list you may surmise, I wore my very best. Looks matter for the press, I heard you shout. Look back to sunken treasure, it was lost. Because of want, not glory, it was all about. Yes, mate, and guest alike, our lesson lost. The death and sadness in the search for drifted o'er and close alike. The captain's the boss. Listen to the order strong, the safety list. Checked each box with eye and hand strong. With that all said, sail upon, wave to the mist. You, my friends, with prayer come along, to see the glory of each day. On our way, tonight's sleep will ease our hearts, and we will not toss.
Okay. This one rang me. There's a lot of boating metaphors in there. There's a lot of seamanship in there. It's very interesting. I worked in manufacturing, so safety list, that's important. That rang very, very, very important, because if you don't follow your safety rules and regulations, people die. People can lose their hands, people can fall off scaffolding. The thing that has me baffled, and I want some clarification on this, is when you read through this, the feelings I got was the individual or whoever was in thought had feelings of, oh, we forgot our safety list. Okay, well, here's the thoughts on this. I go back and forth. Is it okay? Is it not okay? Now, tell me, what were you trying to convey? Because that's what I felt when you were reading that and when I was reading with you.
Well, you know, being from Florida and boating, and boats, the captain and the maid always tell you whether it's a tour boat or not, but they do the safety check prior to the arrival of their paying guest. Being a former Teamster steward, the stagecraft and the work prior to filming any series or preparation can be done 2 days, 3 days ahead of time, and it's a safety list. You don't want people tripping over wires. You don't want people interfering with your technical work. plugging in here, plugging in there. It's preparation, and the safety list meets that requirement. If I don't meet people that have safety first on their mind, 9 times out of 10, like you do a prep to what you do on your podcast. Prep work is essential in any work.
Like me having given us the 2 cups of coffee to actually keep us fresh and ready.
Well, yeah, coffee. And never forget how important the people are that making the coffee.
Oh, absolutely.
And if the table gets knocked over, it's because somebody forgot to put us in line to get the coffee.
Of course. The other thing I wanted to say is, in regards to this, thank you for coming. Thank you so much for actually deciding to take time out of both of our mornings to do this, because I know we still have one more poem to go through, but I want to say this personally, and as my friend, you've been with me through a lot of my drama, and I want to say this online so that the world can actually hear it. Thank you. Thank you for being my friend, and this is the least I can do for you.
Well, David, the last poem is for everybody out there, and hoping they get back to your podcast. I see some quality in it. This poem is very important for everybody to listen to. If you've gotten this far, at least read Peacemaker. From Andrew Greenleaf. Peacemaker. Listen now, I send my song to rap. We all hear the amendment crap. First of all, we gathered here to listen and sing and call a cheer. Fist not so strong, 2 fingers fly. Our flag's not dark with anger, try. Pull back from hate and hold probate. Your justice the deal breaker, not late. All tall to the dance, sway, we pray. The gun raised no children today, killed only that death maker with the few, whom not sat down to listen at thy pew. We all here amend this true to those for peace with love, carry on. Hold voice with freedom, you are caretaker, peacemaker.
Okay, I'm getting a lot of vibes here. I want to explain this, and I'm going to have to be kind of careful because this is now in some touchy subjects. Now, for those of you who are younger, it might be time to consider hopping off of the stream. I would say this is more mature content that we're about to talk about, so I may make this a 13-point cutout. So at this point, we're going to be talking about guns. We're going to be talking about rights, and we're going to be talking about certain things about America politics. So, if you're not in for this, time for you to jump off. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much. And, like always, keep it real. Now, those of you who are staying and are going to actually allow us to continue this topic and discussion, Andy, tell me, what is your message? Before I actually say what I interpreted from it and what I felt from it, tell me what your message was.
I think you're right on here with the message I was trying to put out to our younger generation. As us elders get older and we die, and don't forget Jimmy Buffett died recently.
So did several others, unfortunately.
Those of us from the baby boom generation, we're fading out. We're either fading out in our minds, or we're fading out in our actual health and death. If we don't have a generation in America that steps up and speaks from their heart, we'll lose that vote. You'll lose your strength in actual poetry. A woman the other day mentioned a woman that spoke at the last inauguration. Her poetry was so forward thinking. It not only had a beautiful, uniting tone, but it was flavorful in the progressive poetry that she used. That's what our leaders need today. As the generations behind me carry on and vote in their leadership, don't forget to add your voice, but not overreact. Sometimes you're right, and I'm not sure what my message is. I'm hoping others don't get caught up in overreacting. We all have our First Amendment right, Second Amendment right, Third Amendment right, Fourth Amendment right. And when you're in an open forum like this, sure, we can always take the Fifth Amendment and not speak about it. But what is the Sixth, the Seventh, Eighth, Ninth, and 10th? And whether other amendments came along, came from new thinking, fresh thinking. And that's where we can bury the hatchet.
Now, this is very curious because this is one of those things where it's a question I'm going to raise to my community and to anybody who's visiting who's not from the David Stream family. What do you know of the 10 amendments, and what do you know of the amendments past that point? Now, for me, my personal knowledge goes to the first, the second, and I think the third and the fifth. But my knowledge base isn't that great, and the point is I've actually let go of my government politics as much. I care about what's going on in my day-to-day life. Those of the David Stream family know that have been very colorful in my politics, and I have my own opinions. Now, I'm willing to discuss those at later points in my stream, but I tend to keep politics from the David Stream channel and also from the David Stream community in Discord so that we actually can communicate with each other at peace and have a more...
That term forum, four people, like, we work on our four-player chess, forums, and in college, it's already printed. The same way that you've printed my poetry, the Bill of Rights was already printed. The Declaration of Independence was already printed. The amendments to the Constitution are what politicians look at, and they argue, and they, full of a lot of malarkey, they tweet it because they're getting paid, they're on a salary.
Mm-hmm.
My point is, in open programs like you have, David, is to do the background then, read the Bill of Rights, read those amendments, particularly now. We're a couple years away from our 250th anniversary of the Revolution. Our Continental Congress spent 6 years discussing, reconvening, and working on those Bill of Rights amendments in the Constitution. It's not a process that happens in one day in a newspaper or a TV interview. It doesn't happen at the late night show. Everybody has a tendency to interfere with their politics. It's whether you can come to the resolutions.
I will say, we're going to go ahead and move on to some of the details regarding your poem now. And I will say, we'll actually post an image of the Bill of Rights with the amendments after this post-recording. And I want to make certain, if you're watching this, thank you for sticking around as long as you have. I appreciate it. Andy appreciates it. Please leave comments. Please share this. I want this to be a discussion because there's so much hate, there's so much pain, there's so much anguish, there's so much things, there's so many things going on in American politics and in our world. Why? It's one of the reasons why I decided to set up David Stream in the first place. I had lost my voice in an 8-month time period. I wanted people to see that no matter what you're doing, no matter what issues you have, you can overcome it. I was during the worst part of the David Stream experience and my worst part. I was struggling car-bound for 2 years, and I still decided to keep content up. Now, the fact is I'm not going to go into full details about that here. It's not important. What's important is about the fact of your message and what's going on.
Well, there's another thing that you can work on.
What?
As my friend, like Carvel ice cream. Sometimes listening to other people's intellect, we got to get them to laugh a little bit.
Of course.
Carvel ice cream. Now, your coffee isn't as good as you told me. You told me it was French coffee?
No, it's French press coffee, not French coffee.
Press coffee.
Here.
Well, I would have preferred a Starbucks coffee, to tell you the truth.
What is it, too bland, too watery, or just took too long?
Well, it could use a little cream and sugar.
I drink my coffee black, and each person has their own opinion and their own taste. Now, like this, gun owners. Am I going to argue your Second Right Amendment to actually have weapons? No. But I'm going to argue about the fact of being responsible with your stuff. About being responsible with your children. About being responsible for who's handling the stuff. At one point, my opinions were something different. For people who don't know their American rights, and for the policemen who actually abuse people because they don't know the rights. They don't know the amendments.
I would recommend that if you did an interview or a podcast backing down to your comment there about the safety of guns, you could interview a sheriff or a deputy on his time off, and he would give you a better reflection.
Of course.
Just to give you some of my other poems, and particularly with September 11th coming up, are dedicated to first responders. And the Second Amendment right, I think, is understood by a great population, and it's an important right, and it wouldn't have been written in the Constitution if there wasn't a background for it. I agree, but I also, in my poetry, will, as you pointed out in politics, what's the point of disagreement if we can't resolve and move on to something else? It's a personal thing to have that safety latch on, how you use your gun. A hunter knows that. And I think the original purpose of hunting, that's it. You follow your safety list. The other anger issues that people may have, it's in the paper all the time. I didn't buy a gun to kill my wife, my grandmother, and 3 children and attack the school. That's where anger comes in. It's a whole, what's the word, generic political conversation. And that's why I mentioned the other amendments to the Constitution. Move on. Read the other amendments. You can get caught by a journalist just talking about one gun issue. Move on with your thinking. Find a peaceful place in your heart. Try to move on. Any man has a backlash in his mind after he shoots a deer, whether he killed the female deer or he got a good buck. A hunter's viewpoint is towards safety. He didn't go out there to gun down grandmother, his family, and the neighbors. He went out there to shoot a buck. So with the anniversary, 250th anniversary, one of my favorite Facebook pages is the Outlander folks. It's a different dimension. We live now. Why did our ancestors talk about the right to bear arms then? It was essential to our revolution. It was essential to our democracy. So what else was essential to our democracy? What other conversations could you have so that you got the Carvel ice cream and you can move on from something that you felt negative about in the past?
Which is one reason why I said, please, do me a favor. Let's not get stuck on guns. and let's actually see how many amendments you know. Those of you who are listening and watching this, please check out the end of the video and see if you know all the amendments. See what your knowledge base is. Question yourself and see how much you know about what we are, what our nation is, who we are meant to be.
That's finding Forrester.
Now, folks, me and Andy, we're having a lovely Monday. It's a holiday weekend here in the United States, and for those of you in the other parts of the world, I know I have many followers who are actually outside of the United States. These are things that we Americans have to face and question. These are things that we Americans have to realize and actually rationalize and figure out. Because the problem is what's going on with Donald Trump, Biden, and everybody else is so much is politicized. There's red, there's blue. There's right, there's wrong. There's no interplay between the two sides. There's no...
But where a lot of your listeners are at, David, is there is the white and the yellow. I'm an independent, and the reason is the blue and the red. It's sort of like my poem about electronics. You just let the press paint everything red and blue. How many of us know our colors about white and yellow or green? The colors are very important in regards to how you feel about things. I emphasized stop voting for the old guys. What happened 3 years ago was an election. Your generation's in charge of the next election. Why, as an old baby boomer, do I have to keep following a negative press when podcasts and freedom of democracy and how we express ourselves is more important for the future? If you want to talk about what happened 250 years ago in 1776, my next series of poems will dedicate it to that.
Now, folks,
if you want to talk about the Second World War, you can interview a history professor.
Now, once I get a proper studio and stop interviewing out of my personal office, that would be a good thing to do. And agreement, the setup I have here is a little janky, and I'm working on getting it better. I've already improved my setup a little bit. Now, one of those things is my desk is probably worth like $300. Anyways, let's cut to the chase and switch topics to something else. But back to the point. It matters. What we Americans need to do is think. The story about the fact of, with this poem saying the gun raised no children today. It's a tool. It's a tool. Guns are tools. It's
that
like...
line. Would you like me to explain that line?
Go right ahead, my friend.
I grew up with Mattel toys, and with Barbie on, us boys played with Mattel toys. I played with a .30 caliber machine gun out of plastic. I played with a mortar made by Mattel to practice the Second World War, what my uncles and fathers had done. Toys are toys. Children play with toys. And there's a difference between playing with a plastic Mattel toy and a difference in playing with a real United States Army .30 caliber machine gun. You would, in the U.S. Army, the sergeant and the training would be how to use a .30 caliber machine gun mounted on a pod to fire. And you may even get instructions, we may not be gunning down children, we are gunning down our enemy. And the different viewpoint I have is, did you gun down any children today? Were you teaching your children that safety that you mentioned? Were you teaching gun there are podcasts to teach you how to take a gun apart and put it back together. Wait,
brief pause there. Just real quick, thank you very much. I think where Andy was trying to go with this, and I could have his commentary afterwards if you like, in the comment section down below, but where he was trying to go with it is you can teach people to break down weapons, to be safe. There's online forums about it, there's ways how we do it, but at the end of the day, is that what we're trying to do? Is that what we're trying to do for our children? Is that what we're trying to do for our future? Are we trying to focus on the polarization between guns and no guns? Or are we trying to focus on something bigger? What matters? What matters? Just as something to bring up, and like I said before, it matters. Anyways, I'll cut back to the interview and we'll get back to it. Please enjoy. Hey there, everybody. This is David with David Streams.
Pride in engineering, there's a pride in, and there's a step in. There are podcasts to teach you how to take a gun apart and put it back together. They do that in the U.S. Army. But in the Coast Guard or the Navy, you may have a different focus. It's great that if on a podcast you can demonstrate by video how to take a gun apart and put it all back together, and then you're selling it. You buy it for $500, then you sell it for $800. For a lot of men and women, it's an investment like a car. Mm-hmm. You buy a car, but can you take it apart and put it back together? So there's a pride in engineering, there's a pride in, and there's a step and a procedure for everything. But I like the way you mentioned, is there a procedure and safety, and who are you going to use the gun for or against? And that's freedom, and that's what Americans talk about. Are you going to use your gun for freedom or for democracy, or are you going to use it against democracy and interfere with somebody else's freedoms? Particularly, don't gun down my children.
Folks, the last bit of this that I want to bring up, that rang very true to me. We are all here. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm having an issue here. We are all here around this, or amend this true. I'm sorry. We are all here, amend this true too.
We are all here, amend this true too.
Okay, I want to make certain.
To those for peace with love, carry on. Hold voice with freedom. You are the caretaker. Peacemakers. At the end of all my poems, I either mention God, religion, or your within your heart. What are you thinking within yourself? And a peacemaker is a negotiator. He's trying to bring a peace treaty. And in our background throughout American history, if you make a treaty and you make an agreement, you have to read it, know what it was, and why did you shake hands at the end of the agreement? And the next politician or leader comes along and he has to read it. And he knows his responsibility to the past treaty. So not negatively toward our past president, Mr. Trump, our current president, Mr. Biden, or previous presidents from Obama on down the line to George Washington. When a treaty was made, they had to read the treaty. And from there, they could formulate their politics.
Okay.
Politics are separate from agreements.
Yes.
And what a peacemaker does is try to get everybody to put their guns down, put the safety on, and come to a resolution.
Now, let me pause you real quick there for a moment, and I do apologize. This is important for my generation and for the generation past mine. And this is going to be huge. So bear with me a moment while I share this. These two lines are important to understand. Who not sat down to listen at thy pew? We are all here, amend this true too. To those for peace with love carry on. hold voice with freedom, you are caretaker. For millennials, for Gen X, we are the caretakers. It is our job to be peacemakers. It is our job to be caretakers for the next upcoming generation. It is foolish to be up in arms and to be stupidly fighting each other when we need to be caretakers. I understand religious is important. Religiousness, or being part of a religion, gives you a community that you can actually sit down and have values to. It's one of those things where myself as a Christian believer, and now I don't bring religion up in my Discord or in my channel often, because you have a right to believe in what you believe in. I will not argue your viewpoints, but I will say you have to. It is so imperative to have some type of moral compass, a moral code, an ideology, or some type of viewpoint given to you by your parents. If you do not have that, seek it. If you don't have that, you're lost. And it's so hard to get back to where we need to be as caretakers.
Well expressed.
I want to stress this enough. There's been times when I've faced difficulty, when I've talked about my own issues of facing suicide when I was young, of facing those trials and tribulations and teenage when I was a teenager. I keep stressing this, and I know I'm bringing up touchy subjects. That's the reason why I said, please, those of you who were young, please help off, because this is touching subjects that are true, subjects that are difficult, and subjects that are hard. Seek help and get support. The moment you're alone, you start losing. You have to
That's
have.
where I hope if you share some more of my poems in the future podcasts, I really work on that. I try to add nature and get people to go outside a little bit more, look to the sky and look to the trees and look to the water and feel the strength of Mother Nature. And she's been butting us up, man. She's been just kicking our ass recently when it comes to weather. And so we face these things daily, and the response is what's important. So with our honor, the Coast Guard, the Navy, our first responders, the leadership that understands their first priorities. The term first priority is the community and the people. And that's what the forefathers were trying to say. The other priorities come into departments.
We as a nation, we as an American people, have kind of lost that because of the polarization of politics. The news hasn't made that any better. And it's one of those things where we need to start coming together. So those of you still on, even though this is very touchy, and I know that I could get canceled all over again because of the touchiness of this, share this. Share this with your loved ones. Share it with your family. Share it with anybody who wants to listen. Because at this time, we need to start listening instead of talking.
Why don't we end it on that note?
Absolutely, my friend. Like always, from my home, from my family, to the Davis Dream family, keep it real. Bye now. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. If you're watching this post live, I do apologize about some of the difficulties I had getting the clips up. Once again, I'm going to frame this. The U.S. Constitution preamble. We the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Do obtain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. All right. Now, once again, our Bills of Rights. The fundamental information regarding the United States. Freedoms, petitions, and assembly. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the right of the people to peacefully to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Number 2, the right to bear arms. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, and the right for the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Number 3, quartering soldiers. No soldier shall, in times of peace, be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law. Search and arrest. The right of the people to be secured in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall be issued but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. These are your rights. These are the rights that should be exercised whenever a police officer or any other individual of authority is doing these things. The right of criminal cases. Here we go. No person should be held to answer for capital or otherwise infamous crimes unless on presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces or in the militia, when in actual service in time of war or in public danger. Nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy or of life or limb, nor shall be compelled in any case to be a witness against himself, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. 6th, a right to a fair trial. In all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial judge of the state and district wherein the crime shall be committed, which district shall have been previously ascertained by law, and to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation, to be confronted with the witness against him, to have compulsory process and for obtaining witness in his favor, and to have the assistance of counsel for his defense. Civil cases. Anyways, folks, thank you very much, and like always, keep it real, look into this information, know your rights, understand your freedoms, and for fellow Americans, thank you very much for sticking around. Goodbye.